Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss whether or not video game adaptations should tell their own stories. So this came off of another episode I did. Once again, I have no idea what order I'm going to be putting these things out or when that other episode will come out. But this is based off of the idea I had where it was like, what works better for adaptations? Should it be real, live action or CGI? And I was thinking like, well, with CGI, you can do this, this, and this. You can, follow more along the lines of the actual games and do some of the crazier things that we see. And then that made me think like, well, should adaptations even recreate the actual stories of the games that we played? Because every time they do it, they don't do it anyway. And that's what sucks. But there's so many elements of stories where it's like, well, if you told your own story within that world, it could easily be entertaining. Fallout is the perfect example. It might actually be like the only example, really, where it's like, hey, it's set within the world, because oddly enough, all the other things where it's like, yeah, it doesn't really follow the games, it's still meant to somehow. Like the Resident Evil Netflix series, technically that's supposed to be after like Resident Evil 6 or something. And then of course all the movies really are their own thing, so that's a different story. But I feel like a lot of live action things are like, all right, we're going to follow the direct story, and then they fail. But at the same time, when they don't follow the direct story, they also fail. So it's once again a very interesting conundrum, because some stories I feel like you can easily tell and kind of recreate one-to-one. Like, I mean, we've said it for years as Resident Evil fans, but Resident Evil should be like the easiest one on earth to do, especially if you're starting at the beginning, meaning Resident Evil 1, not Resident Evil 0. But it's a couple of people in a big house. That's it. Like, it should be the easiest thing in the world to recreate Resident Evil one-to-one. Maybe not one-to-one, obviously you won't have like all the puzzles and backtracking, but you can throw like at least 2 or 3 puzzles in there and it totally makes sense. And it's just like, this is insane how this does not work. And that's what makes me wonder, is like, should we just get to the point where video game adaptations don't retell the same story? Because it's not going to be as good. Like, it'll be entertaining, but even if we get a recreation, it's not going to be as good as playing the game itself. The Last of Us is a great example. They changed some things around, so like it follows the game, but they switched some stuff up. There are definitely some major differences there. And then, like I said, the Resident Evil movies don't even really follow anything unless you're going with Welcome to Raccoon City, which is a mash of Resident Evil 1 and 2 together. And that doesn't work at all when they could have just done Resident Evil 1. I still don't understand it, but it is what it is. Then the Netflix series just doesn't make sense. It just is what it is. And then you have the CG movies. And those tell stories, they're their own original stories, but they utilize the characters from the games. And so they tell stories in between the games instead of just recreating the stories of the games. And it's just like, hey, here's something that's in between what's going on. And that makes me wonder, like, is that where we should just go with video game adaptations? Should we just go with stories being unique to themselves? Because Sonic does it, and Sonic works. Dungeons and Dragons is set in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's its own story. And that's an amazing movie. Extremely underrated, by the way. I highly recommend that movie. It's hilarious. Please go. I don't know what it's on, but just watch the Dungeons and Dragons movie if you haven't. Until Dawn, recent movie that failed, told its own story, had nothing to do with the game. Seemed like an interesting concept, and they just slapped the Until Dawn name on it. But that told its own story. That didn't work, obviously, but once again, it wasn't even really in the world. Like, when I say tell its own story, it still has to be in the world of the game. The Resident Evil movies don't really count. Fallout works. Dungeons and Dragons work because it's in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, but it tells its own story. It doesn't recreate a story that's already existed. It's just like, hey, here's a campaign, and then boom, there's your story. So, and I hope we get a sequel to that. I really do. It was such a good movie. It was so funny. Highly underrated. But go see that, please. Or find a way to watch it somewhere, because it really is that good. It's funny. But a lot of the stories, when they tell their own story, if it's within the world, it seems to work. Fallout works. Absolutely love that. Can't wait for season 2. Dungeons and Dragons worked. Can't wait for hopefully a sequel to that. And then you have just about everything else. I think Arcane, I don't even know how you really count that, because it's so different from like the actual story of the game. I don't even know. That one works well, of course, too. Like, it's really well done. It's like a alternate interpretation of the story of the game. I'm not like the most familiar with the game, but it's definitely different. Like, and obviously just everything that you see in that would just not translate to anything related to that game if you actually played it. Like there's just no correlation. But it's a great story, fantastic series. But it's just one of those things, like, do you just tell your own story set within the universe? Or do you try to recreate what happened? I don't know if we've really had too many accurate recreations at all. I think Super Mario Brothers might, oddly enough, be like the most accurate thing we've had, and that's from Nintendo themselves. And even that's really different than what you might expect going into Mario, because they just had to kind of mash a lot of different things together, including adding, Donkey Kong in there and stuff like that. So even that's like, all right, well, this is their official version of this thing, and it was great. It was a really good movie. But should adaptations just tell their own stories within the world? Because when they try to recreate it, they either just don't, and they just slap a name on something that's like, well, we got like one of the, or two of the characters in here. That should be good enough, right? It's like, no, that's not how that works. Monster Hunter has a movie, and instead of it just being, hey, what if it's people that fight giant dinosaurs, basically, and all these sorts of crazy creatures? What if instead it was like an army crew that was transported to an alternate dimension? Like, what are you effing talking about? Why would you do that? Why would you do, like, that makes no sense. Just make a fantasy movie. I mean, like, I guess it would count as fantasy. I feel like Monster Hunter is like pseudo fantasy, but it's like, just throw some effing people in a world and then they hunt monsters. Monster Hunter, that's it. We got to fight this dragon. I need the scales off this dragon for a potion. It's like anything, I don't know, something. But instead they went with the army. An army got teleported, and then they fought some monsters. It's like, that makes no sense. Why would you do that? Why did they do that? It makes no sense whatsoever. But those are the types of things that keep happening. So it makes me wonder, should we just say, hey, just take the license and just make something in the world? Don't try to recreate it. Don't say, like, here's this character and that character and stuff. Just make your own characters, put them in the world, and just make a good story out of it. Like, I think that could easily work for Resident Evil. As much as I would love, at this point, I think we deserve to have it recreated. Like, we've suffered enough with just, like, Resident Evil just getting whatever when it comes to live action stuff. Obviously the CG movies are great because that's actually Capcom being like, hey, we want to make this, canonical story. But when it comes to live action stuff, it's just like, yeah, whatever. Here's a thing that's technically just called Resident Evil. But at this point, I would like to see Resident Evil actually get a remake or an adaptation that's like official one-to-one. But I also wouldn't hate it if they were just like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We'll just make some stories, set it during, honestly, just set it during Resident Evil 2 and 3, make it like Resident Evil Outbreak, and that's all you have to do. Like, you could seriously make an anthology series of a ton of different characters. It's one, 2 days, like a day and a half? You can make 1,000,000 stories out of that. It's an entire city. They had to nuke the city. There are 1 billion stories you can tell. Not everybody even has to live. Some of the stories can just be really sad and messed up. Like, oh, I thought they were gonna make it. Not everybody does. It's easy. Like, I feel like you can honestly just do like an anthology series set during the actual outbreak, and that's it. Doesn't have to follow a bunch of, 1 or 2 characters all the way through. It could just be an anthology. This character was in this part of the city, this character was over here, this is set during this time, and that's it. That's all you gotta do. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but I feel like that works for Resident Evil, because the adaptation thing clearly isn't playing out, because nobody wants to actually adapt the real story of Resident Evil 1. And the closest we got, of course, was Welcome to Raccoon City, where they were like, well, we just can't, for whatever reason, we can't just do Resident Evil 1. We have to blend Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, and kind of a little bit Resident Evil 3, because technically they did blow up the city at the end. And it's just weird. It's just like, all you have to do is just send 5 people to a mansion. It's very simple. I just don't understand why they can't do it. Whether it's live action or CG, it would be like the simplest thing in the world. Like, you're building one big house, like a quarter of it, honestly. A lot of it's gonna be CG, build some stairs, and then have some blue screen walls or something. And just do that. Just send them to the mansion, play on the piano, do the clock puzzle, just because that like ruined my life as a child. So just, you gotta include the clock puzzle. And that's it. Put some chat, like do the shotgun, do the wooden shotgun, do the ceiling collapse, and like, just, that's all you gotta do. Is like, you only gotta hit like 2 or 3 things, honestly, and we're set. That's all you gotta do. I don't understand it. And it's the same way with a lot of other things. It's like Doom, the Doom movie. I don't understand how that failed back in the day. And I think there was like a new Doom series that came out fairly recently. Apparently that was horrible. But there are so many things where it's like, maybe you should just put it in the world. Just put a soldier in the world of this thing. Like Halo did that. Not the new Halo series, but the old, I forgot what it was even called, but it was actually really good. It was like a mini series, and it was basically like these kids that were training to become Spartans or something like that. Like, it was a long time ago, so I can't remember the exact story. But I believe Osric Chow was like the main character in that. But I thought that was really good. It was just set in the world of Halo, and it's like, hey, this is what it's like to become a recruit that is like, hey, I want to be a Spartan. It's like, I bet you do. And it's just going through this process, and then things get really crazy. As you can imagine, bad guys show up. And then it's like, well, how the F do we handle this? And it was just a really good thing. Like, altogether, I think it's like a 2-hour movie or something like that if you just watch it all at once. But it was really good. And I always remember being like, wow, this is actually super entertaining. Like, this doesn't focus on Master Chief. It's just set in the world, and it's entertaining. If you like lore of, you know, these different universes and stuff, it's just fun. And like, oh, here's something. Dead Space. Oh my God, man, I hate EA so much. But Dead Space has 2 movies. They're both animated, and each one is set within the world of Dead Space, but it's not recreating the story of the games. It's telling you a story that's either, you know, well, I guess technically the first movie is like a prequel, like it ends as the first game is beginning. But I love the first movie. I believe it's Dead Space Downfall, I think, is the first movie, and then Aftermath is the sequel. And both those movies are stories set within the universe. Obviously, the first movie is literally, like I said, it's like basically a straight prequel to the actual game. And it's amazing. It's its own story that leads into what's happening in Dead Space 1. Like, you see the actual breakdown as the necromorphs start to take over. And it's like, this is really, really good. It doesn't have to be like, well, let's just recreate the game. No, it's like, let's tell a story that leads into the game. And then the second one is set that tells a story leading into the second game. Where it's like, this is what happened, and this is how basically the breakout in the second game ends up happening. And just little stuff like that, like just fill in the gaps of things that we don't know officially, or, you know, characters that might have been mentioned, you know, depending on the game, of course. You pick up a little note or something, it's like, oh, this character. Like, you can fill in those gaps. Like, I think a good story would actually be set, you know, if you did Resident Evil 1 and it was the Spencer Mansion actually like breaking down and people dying in the Spencer Mansion as it fell apart, I'd love to see that. If Capcom did like a canonical story, or if someone just did a good story and it was like, yeah, this is what happened before, even, you know, obviously it would only be Rebecca for Bravo Team, but like, this is what happened before Star showed up. This is what happened in the Spencer Mansion. And you could just do like, honestly, you could do it set for like a week. Like a full week where like it starts off normal, you just see what they're doing, the experiments that they talk about and everything, and then just the deterioration of characters. You could actually have, you know, obviously there's been, you know, fan films and stuff, The Keeper's Diary, check that out. But you could do stuff like that. And it's like, oh, this is the person that wrote the note, you know, the Itchy Tasty. Like, you could have that story in there. You could have other characters. And I mean, honestly, most of these people, you know, they're all dead. So you could literally make up brand new characters and it wouldn't even matter, because it's like, okay, a random scientist that died, it's okay to add that to the canon because it doesn't destroy anything. It just adds another story where it's another person that was a scientist working in the Spencer Mansion, or it could have been anybody that was just there on the grounds or something like that. All sorts of things that they could do, and it could just be set before the first game. And it's like, hey, this is just how the mansion fell apart. If that's what you want to do, you can easily do that. If you want to do the mansion from Resident Evil 0, you could do the same thing. Like, this is what happened there, and this is where, this is how this kind of fell apart. Honestly, I might like it more if it was the mansion from 0, because I think the Spencer Mansion, and this might sound weird, but if you play Resident Evil, you know what I'm talking about. I always felt like the Spencer Mansion was normal compared to the mansion from Resident Evil 0, because that had like grand halls, and then you actually go to like so many different locations just within the mansion itself. I always felt like the Spencer Mansion, as weird as it is, always felt a little bit more normal when it came to the rooms, because everything felt like fairly succinct. And then in Resident Evil 0, it would be like, okay, here's like a little dining area, and then you go down the hallway, and then it's like, well, if you go down these stairs, you go to like just a crazy location where like the, you know, they have the hunters and stuff, and then they got like the crazy monkey prison room, and then they got another prison room, and then they got barracks, and like there's, I feel like, more variety in the mansion from RE0, and it's just a little bit crazier. But it's one of those interesting things. I think they could definitely do it. Just make up a story, put it in the mansion. It could be random people. We know they all die, and that's fine. Let us just see the chaos unfold. And that's something that a lot of games could have as far as adaptations. We have I think God of War is coming out. That's just going to be a recreation. I'm very curious about that. And we'll see. I hope it works, of course. Fallout, like I said, is its own story set in the world. Very well done. The Last of Us is a recreation, but I feel like it's not as good as the actual games. And I think people have said that quite a bit for season 2, and not just because of what happened, but I think people have been like, yeah, it's just not as good as the story was told, originally. Like the changes they made in season 1, people are like, oh, it's still really great. And then season 2 comes along, and I think half of it probably has to do with just how the story naturally plays out, but also the way they changed some things. Like that game is way longer than the first game, and they had to split into 2 seasons, and it still feels like they cut out a bunch of stuff. Just from the episodes I've caught up on, I'm like, yeah, it feels like a lot has changed, in like some odd ways. So I don't know. It's interesting. Recreations rarely happen to begin with, which is super insane. Like it's funny to be like, should they make their own thing? Most adaptations do make their own thing, and they constantly fail. And on the rare occasion we have a recreation, you have a lesser version of something we've already experienced. And it's just like, it's an odd middle ground to be in, because like I said, for Resident Evil, we've gotten so much stuff that is just alternate things and just made up stories that I would like to see it done, because it's the only thing that's had 100 million things done for it, and none of them were just recreating the first game. So at this point, for Resident Evil specifically, I would love to just see it done, like 1-to-1. I would love that. But for most other things, it's like, I think we could just go with adaptations. Just do stories within the world. You don't have to recreate it. You could do, heck, even if it was the story of the game, if you told it from someone else's perspective, that could be interesting. And then you could still recreate the story of the game, but then, I would assume that whatever side character you chose, they wouldn't be with the main character 100% of the time. So we'd get to see what they did, and it would still be like, okay, I'm getting the full story of the actual game, but it also still feels a bit fresh because it's from someone else's perspective. So they become the main character versus, the actual main character of the game. So you still get the full story, just from a different perspective. It would be like playing Sonic Adventure or something like that, where it's like, oh, here's everyone else's version of the story, and then you get, it feels like a different playthrough. So I think that could work. I think that might be an interesting way to go about it. But at the same time, we've gotten so few actual recreations of video games, because every effing time they do it, they're like, all right, we're gonna take this thing, it's gonna be this video game, and then we're not gonna do anything that has to do with that video game, but we're gonna say that it's this video game. I think Borderlands, unfortunately, did actually follow stuff. They were on Pandora, and they were hunters and stuff like that, and I think they did play the characters from the actual game. And it's unfortunate that that actually failed as hard as it did. So that's very sad, because it was like, that actually was a recreation, and it sucked. And it's like, well, that's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate, because we barely get actual recreations of stories. And then that one failed. The Last of Us was so different that there were still issues where it's like, I'd rather just play the game. And then season 2 is the exact same thing. Like I'd honestly just rather experience the story through the game than watch it, because it's just not as entertaining. Some stuff is cool, like, some of the changes are interesting to watch because I know the story. So, that does add to it, where it's like, oh, they changed this around. It's like, oh, that's entertaining to see. But ultimately, it's like, yeah, I still just like the story of the game. Plus, there will always be more to do, even when they do a series. Last of Us is being the perfect example. Even when you do it as a series, which every adaptation should be, once again, another video to discuss, or like I think every adaptation should honestly just be a TV show. Dungeons and Dragons is like a great example. Honestly, the idea of having alternate stories is a great counter to that, but at the same time, it always boils down to the writing, honestly, because most adaptations, whether it's a movie or a show, don't really work, because they tell their own story, and then it's just like, well, this kind of blows. But it's interesting, kind of going through that process of being like, all right, well, what's going to happen when we have an adaptation? Whatever the next adaptation is going to be. If it is God of War ends up being the next one that officially comes out, is it just going to be, God of War, was it 2018 was when that came out? So it's just going to be God of War and then Ragnarok? Or is there going to be anything new? Because if you're telling that story, is there any way that that possibly comes out, even as a series? Is there any way that that comes out as fun as the game is to play? Granted, it's, you know, it's more in the realm of kind of how a lot of first-party PlayStation games are, where it's the over-the-shoulder thing, which I personally like. I know a lot of people feel like, you know, it's repetitive and boring, or like, you know, it's over-the-shoulder and, you know, action-adventure kind of story thing. I personally like that. I'm definitely more of a single-player story guy, so I like those games. But is there any way that the God of War show could be as good as the game? I'm sure it'll be great. I certainly hope it's going to be great, but it's going to be a live-action series retelling the story of the game. And it's like, I just don't know how well that's going to turn out. But I certainly hope it turns out well. That's for sure. I want all video game properties, when they're adapted, to be great. But unfortunately, we get most of what we've gotten throughout the history of video game adaptations. And even recently, you get Until Dawn, or you get Borderlands. And both of those are so different. Until Dawn is one of those situations where they just slap the name on it, has nothing to do with the game, not even remotely close to being like the game. And then Borderlands, almost one-to-one recreation, at least like Borderlands 2, I think is more appropriate. But both failed. Both were really, you know, deemed quite bad. And one was a one-to-one, one was a, you know, unique adaptation. I can't even say it was a unique adaptation, it just had the name slapped on it. But I don't know, it's an interesting, you know, concept as we kind of continue to go through this process of being like, all right, how do we get video game stories either on the big screen if it's movies, or just on streaming and stuff for TV shows? Do we go with one-to-one recreations, or do we go with unique stories set within the world? Because right now, for the most part, we get neither. We don't get one-to-one recreations. We mostly just get things with the name slapped on, and then they're like, okay, it's this thing, and once again, it has nothing to do with this thing. Like, it's not really like that. So I would love to know your thoughts. Like, should video game adaptations ever be one-to-one, or should we just get rid of that idea as a whole? Because they've proven, like, almost 100% of the time that it just doesn't work. Or at the very least, you know, when they do give it a shot, like I said, Borderlands is genuinely, I'm sure there are others, but Borderlands is like the only example I can really think of where they're like, hey, it's this thing, and it's actually that thing. It's not, oh, it's Resident Evil. Like, no, it's not. But Borderlands is like the only one where it was kind of a one-to-one thing. And obviously I haven't seen the actual movie, so I don't know how accurate it was or how close it was 100% to, you know, Borderlands or even Borderlands 2. But they tried to do it. And Resident Evil was the same thing for Welcome to Raccoon City. It was like, they were showing us that they were trying, but then they instantly were like, hey, what if we just mash the stories of 1 and 2? And it's like, well, even then, if I'm being completely honest, if we're being like technical about it, even though they had the characters from Resident Evil 1 and 2, they still changed the story around so much, including, you know, how some of the characters even act. But it's like, even this isn't really a one-to-one recreation. It's super close. You know, it might be as close as Borderlands was, where like, it's super close. These are the characters, these are the locations. It even looks like the actual locations if you're going off of the remake designs. But clearly, you're not telling a one-to-one story of Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 2, because you decided to mash them together and change the dynamics of the characters. Like, once you do so many things, the visuals don't matter. Like, the story is clearly very changed. Even if you say it's like, oh, it's totally based off of Resident Evil 1 and 2. It's like, well, it's not that based off of Resident Evil 1 and 2. But those are just my thoughts on it. Would love to know your thoughts, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys think about the way things have been handled as of late, where we should be going when it comes to adaptations, and whether or not they're one-to-one or if they should just be unique stories. Because I think at this point, they already make them as unique stories because they don't really care that much. Personal opinion, of course. But we'll love to know your thoughts, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.